My name is Laima Vince. I am the English language translator of the Ballads of Kukutis, written by the Lithuanian national poet Marcelijus Martinaitis. I am speaking to you from Nairobi, Kenya, where I am a guest in the beautiful home of my friends Agla and Soren Hansen. Marcelijus Martinaitis used to like to say, Kukutis has traveled to more lands than I have. And this was certainly true during the time of the Soviet occupation, when people could not travel freely outside of the borders of the Soviet Union. And so today, in this short introduction, I would like to introduce you to the history of Lithuania in the 20th century in broad brushstrokes and tell you a little bit about Marcelijus Martinaitis and how he has created this legendary character. The American historian Timothy Snyder was the first to reveal to the West the utter devastation of World War II that was unleashed upon Eastern Europe and the Baltic states in his seminal works, The Bloodlands and Black Earth. Lithuania lay in the middle of that zone of killing and deprivation, the crossroads where two ideologies met, Nazi and Soviet, and fought for domination, killing the local populations indiscriminately. In 1940, Lithuania was occupied by the Soviet Union, and falsified election results were announced to the world to justify the incorporation of Lithuania into the Soviet Union. In June 1941, the Soviets began massively deporting both Christian and Jewish Lithuanian intellectuals, teachers, professors, government employees, merchants, and land-owning farmers to the Arctic regions of Siberia, where they were exploited as forced laborers. Most died of exposure, starvation, and overwork. Roughly 17,000 people, including women and children, were deported at that time. Some historians believe that Stalin's plan was to clear all of Lithuania of its native population. However, in the summer of 1941, the Nazis interrupted the deportations by occupying Lithuania for the next 4 years. The Nazis, with the help of local collaborators, murdered 95% of Lithuania's Jews in the Holocaust by bullets. A second murderous Soviet occupation followed, which continued until 1990, when Lithuania declared its independence from the Soviet Union. With Russia's war against Ukraine, the Baltic states and the entire region once again are under threat of Russian invasion. Marcelijus Martinaitis was a Lithuanian poet and essayist, recipient of the Lithuanian National Prize in Literature. He was also an active participant in Lithuania's independence movement, Sąjūdis. Martinaitis has published 10 collections of poetry and 3 books of essays, in addition to plays and screenplays. Marcelijus Martinaitis, who was born April 1st, 1936, as a child was both witness and victim of the brutality of war and 2 foreign occupations. He experienced the transition from a peaceful life with his parents on a small farm, living by the traditions of both Catholicism and Lithuanian paganism. In his memoir, Mes gyvenome, We Lived, Martinaitis describes riding in a horse-drawn wagon with his father, a simple farmer, and being stopped by German soldiers. In the distance, he saw the Jewish people of his region being led to their deaths. When Soviet Russia invaded Lithuania a second time in 1944, Martinaitis' region in Samogitia was on the front lines between the fighting Nazis and Soviets. In his memoir, he describes lying in a ditch with his father, watching Soviet and Nazi airplanes battling over their heads, seeing the glow of bombs exploding in the distance. This experience serves as the backdrop to the Ballads of Kukutis. In his memoir, Martinaitis writes, quote, "After all, when you write, you must become that simple, uneducated person to access those aspects of humanity that spring from the traps hidden deep within the mind. It is those truths that demand accuracy, authenticity, evidence. Of the brutality of war, he writes, quote, "During my childhood, at a time when I could have remembered everything, the people around me stopped remembering, stopped talking about where they came from, about what they'd accomplished, because all of that could be used as evidence against them. It was a time when they dug around in our pasts in a terrifying, dangerous way. The occupying Bolshevik regime created a state of non-existence which remains even today in our devastated villages and abandoned farmlands, and in our collective memories, in my memory." The first version of the Ballads of Kukutis was published in Lithuania in 1977. The poet added more poems, updated the collection, and republished it in 1986. The character Kukutis is based on the prototype of a simple Lithuanian pagan farmer who lives his life according to the rhythms of nature and the cosmos, and who is little concerned with the rules imposed on him by whichever regime is in power. At the same time, he is a mythical character who defies the boundaries between life and death, and sometimes speaks from the beyond, and sometimes from his own earthy existence. Martinaitis has told me that much of the character of Kukutis is derived from the stories he remembers being told in his village by the elders when he was a child. In the Ballads of Kukutis, Martinaitis brings us back to the simple wisdom of village life. In his memoir, he writes, quote, "I remember the people in my village, those times when they would sit down to have a serious discussion around the question, what is life? What came out of those discussions was the villagers' philosophy, their insights, their wisdom. All of that has never been written down, unless perhaps accidentally buried somewhere in some classic work of Lithuanian literature. The educated are not the only ones who have the privilege to philosophize. There is so much wisdom that came to me from the simple people in my village." At the same time, the persona of Kukutis acts as a symbol of Lithuania. In the concluding poem in the play, which describes Kukutis' death, Martinaitis is envisioning the death of the Lithuanian nation, a real possibility at the time the poems were written during the Soviet occupation and even now. The poems operate on two levels. Kukutis is both Kukutis and a symbol of Lithuania. But he is not always acting as a symbol of a poetic, agrarian Lithuania with deep cultural roots. At times, Kukutis symbolizes what was considered Homo Sovieticus, the Soviet person. This was a prototype of the type of person the regime sought to create, a man who was not attractive, vague, simple-minded, useless. The Ballads of Kukutis have been translated not only into English, but into more than a dozen languages. The poems act as archetypes, and their lessons can be applied to the experiences of many peoples and nations who have endured totalitarianism. In the 1980s, the ballads were popularized by the Lithuanian singer-songwriter Vytautas Kernagis, who set them to music and performed them all over Lithuania. The poems have been staged many times in Lithuania and now are being presented in this highly successful radio drama by Amanda Dalton. Marcelius Martinaitis passed away April 1st, 2013, but through the persona of Kukutis, he continues to speak to us about the fragility and the beauty of all